You think some little black girl like you can do anything to me? This town is mine now." Crusher Thompson's challenge boomed like a declaration of war, but he had no idea that the woman standing before him was a former Delta Force operator, hiding secrets no one had ever guessed. Join us on a heart-pounding journey where prejudice will be shattered, and true strength lies in the courage of those who seem weakest. Summer rolled into the small town of Oak Ridge like a warm, humid blanket draped over the low-roofed houses peeking out from Oregon's emerald pine forests. Ruby's Cafe, run for 3 generations first by Grandma Ruby, then by her daughter Marge Wilson, had always been a haven of warmth and calm for every Oak Ridge resident. Inside, simple wooden tables, walls crowded with old photographs, and a long service counter topped with worn formica all evoked the sweet nostalgia of a time long past. Amid that tranquil scene, 60-something Marge Wilson bustled behind the counter as always. Her hands, etched with the lines of time, moved with practiced ease as she prepared familiar orders. Sunlight filtered through the windows, and she called out softly, "Sarah." The Henderson Farm delivery's ready. Sarah Miller emerged from the back room, adjusting the plain green cap stamped with Ruby's Cafe. She stood out from anyone else in this little town, not only because she'd moved here less than 2 years ago, but because she was Oak Ridge's only black woman. That difference earned her curious stares, occasional pity, and more than a few prejudiced glances from passing customers. At 35, Sarah still carried a quiet beauty. Healthy brown skin, short, tightly coiled black hair framing her gently striking features, and almost never a trace of makeup. She wore a faded denim jacket over a simple white tee, well-worn jeans, and sturdy boots. Nothing about her appearance was flashy, yet her eyes held a depth and mystery few could understand. "Thanks, Marge. I'll be back in about 40 minutes. Unless Mrs. Henderson wants another grandkid update," Sarah said with a soft smile. Marge chuckled kindly. "Take your time. Oh, by the way, Tom Collins stopped in earlier. He said he saw some unfamiliar bikers camping near Miller's Creek yesterday. Probably just tourists passing through, but you know how small towns are. Always some bit of trouble." Sarah nodded slowly, her expression composed, though her eyes flickered with barely perceptible caution. A familiar feeling crept into her mind. Old memories she'd locked away stirred like a warning. "Thanks for the heads up, Marge. I'll keep an eye out." Stepping out, the cafe's little bell tinkled behind her. Sarah headed for her battered bicycle parked out front. It was her main transportation. Simple and practical, with a large front basket and canvas saddlebags. A car in Oak Ridge seemed overkill for short delivery runs. She pedaled down Main Street at an easy pace, passing familiar faces at storefronts. They waved and smiled in polite greeting, though she knew not everyone felt comfortable with someone like her in their midst. More than once she'd sensed looks of unease, or outright hostility, because of her skin color. Still, Sarah chose silence. She understood that blending into a small town like Oak Ridge wasn't easy, especially as its only black woman, but she believed time would teach people to accept her. On her way to the Henderson farm, memories of her military service flickered in her mind. Sarah had served in Delta Force on top, secret missions against some of the most dangerous criminal organizations. One of those adversaries was the notorious Iron Skulls biker gang. Ruthless, extremist, and fiercely racist. Past encounters had never been simple, and she'd always had to stay on guard. Nearing the turnoff to the farm, a familiar roar shattered the countryside's quiet. The growl of motorcycle engines echoing through the trees. Her heart raced, all her senses snapping alert. In that moment, time seemed to slow as she counted the engines, at least 5 huge Harleys, riding in disciplined formation like soldiers. When the bikers rounded the bend, Sarah knew at once they weren't casual tourists. Leading them was a hulking man with graying hair and beard, clad in a leather vest bristling with polished metal skull insignias, the Iron Skulls. Suddenly, he locked eyes with Sarah, his gaze cold, dripping with contempt and provocation. He slowed, sneered, and shouted loud enough for her to hear. "Hey, black girl. You look a little too comfortable in this town, don't you?" Sarah said nothing, forcing down the anger that flared in her chest. She couldn't let her emotions slip now. Instead, she calmly edged her bike to the side of the road and lowered her head, thinking, "Go ahead and laugh, Raymond Thompson. You haven't changed one bit, but I'm no longer the green soldier you remember." The last bike roared past, the engines fading as they headed back toward town. Sarah drew a deep breath and resumed her ride to the Henderson farm, fully aware. The ghosts of her past had returned, and this time she knew she couldn't run away. Sarah pedaled on down the road toward the Henderson farm, keeping her breathing steady to choke back the anger rising within her. She knew better than anyone that losing control now would blow her cover. Memories of her years in Delta Force, the fierce run, ins with the Iron Skulls, and the defiant glare of their leader, Raymond "Crusher" Thompson, all of it still felt as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. When Sarah's bike turned onto the long gravel drive that led to the Hendersons' place, the familiar hush and peace of the countryside wrapped around her, as if trying to calm the storm in her head. Fields of dry grass on either side had turned a fiery gold, shimmering under the brutal summer sun. Up ahead, the farm came into view. A simple, two-story white house sat beside a large red barn, all enclosed by wooden fences bleached gray by the years. At the house, Sarah stopped her bike and climbed the steps slowly. The door swung open immediately, revealing the kindly figure of Martha Henderson, well into her 60s, her salt, and pepper hair neatly pinned at the nape of her neck. "Oh, Sarah, sweetie, right on time as always." Martha greeted her with a warm smile, accepting the food package. "Come on in and rest a moment. Have some lemonade. It's scorching out there." Sarah returned a soft smile and stepped into the kitchen, where the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. Martha's kitchen always felt like home, yet today Sarah couldn't shake the undercurrent of unease she'd brought with her. Martha poured lemonade into 2 glasses and, in a hushed tone, asked, "Did you see that group of motorcyclists on your way? The ones wearing those menacing leather vests?" Sarah nodded gently. She'd known Martha long enough to recognize the rarity of worry in her voice. "Yes, I saw them just up the road." Martha's face grew serious, her eyes filled with concern. "My husband Bill said they set up camp near Miller's Creek last night. At first we thought they were just tourists, but word is they're trouble. They call themselves the Iron Skulls. Have you ever heard of them?" Sarah feigned a slow shake of her head, hiding the familiarity she felt. "I only heard Marge mention them this morning." Martha glanced around as if afraid of eavesdroppers, then lowered her voice to a whisper. "Bill told me Sheriff Tom Collins is looking into them. Apparently, they caused a disturbance in the next town over recently, but there wasn't enough evidence to arrest anyone." Sarah took a sip of the icy lemonade, keeping her expression calm, so Martha wouldn't suspect anything more. She knew exactly how true Martha's words were. The Iron Skulls were far more than a rowdy biker club. They were extremists, brutal, hateful, especially toward people of color. She had seen their cruelty firsthand on missions years ago. Behind their crude swagger lay a sophisticated criminal network with endless illegal operations. Martha's voice softened even further. "Sarah, I'm really worried for you. Someone like you will be their first target." Sarah looked at Martha, moved by the older woman's genuine concern. She understood why Martha feared for her. As the only black person living in this town, Sarah was used to wary looks and tentative appraisals from neighbors. But with the Iron Skulls, racism did not stop at insults. It escalated to violence and unpredictable cruelty. "I understand," Sarah reassured her. "I'll be careful, Martha. I promise everything will be fine." Martha sighed and placed a comforting hand on Sarah's. "I just fear this little town can't stand up to a dangerous group like them. But Sarah, remember, you're not alone. We all care about you and we'll stand by you." Sarah felt warmth flood her at that heartfelt promise, but she also knew that to protect Oak Ridge, and people like Martha and Bill, she would have to face the ghosts of her past she had worked so hard to bury. After saying goodbye, Sarah swung back onto her bike and headed toward town again. Her mind was tighter than a drawn bowstring. She knew Crusher Thompson and the Iron Skulls would never be content with threats or insults alone. They acted with brutality and planning. More than that, Thompson was no mere brute. He was smart and ruthless, skilled at weaponizing fear and weakness to control others. He had recognized her instantly and taunted her with contempt. He counted on that racial divide to leave her isolated. As she rode slowly, listening to the cicadas droning in the midday heat, Sarah made her decision. She would not let the past repeat itself. She would not let Oak Ridge fall into the spiral of violence and hate that Thompson and his gang intended. This time, she would confront them head on, for herself and for everyone she loved in this small town. Once again, Sarah Miller, the black woman who had been a Delta Force operator, resolved to fight. But this battle would be unlike any she had ever faced, more devious, more dangerous, and more unpredictable than anything in her past. The midday heat bore down on Sarah's shoulders like an invisible burden as she rode back toward Oak Ridge. Martha Henderson's warning still echoed in her mind, mingling with Crusher Thompson's cold, menacing glare. But those fears paled beside the torrent of memories flooding her thoughts. She stopped under a large roadside oak, pulled a water bottle from her pack, and took a long, steadying drink. Her eyes drifted up to the cloudless sky, but her mind returned to the years she'd spent in her Delta Force uniform. Back then, Sarah had been one of the few black women ever selected for America's premier special, Operations Unit. To earn that spot, she'd endured grueling physical trials and shattered deep-seated biases among superiors and peers alike. She never backed down, driven not just to prove herself, but to represent her entire community. Her missions weren't confined to distant battlefields where global terror was the enemy. Time and again, Delta Force had dispatched her on domestic operations against violent extremist cells, using brutality to sow fear and division. Of those criminal groups, the Iron Skulls stood out most in her memory. She still recalled their first encounter nearly a decade ago, during a covert mission to dismantle their weapons and drug trafficking network in the American West. The Iron Skulls weren't merely a rowdy biker gang. They were a highly organized, ruthlessly efficient criminal syndicate fueled by white, supremacist ideology. Sarah had infiltrated their ranks undercover as an arms broker, gathering intelligence from the inside. One of her contacts was Raymond Crusher Thompson himself, the same man now strutting through quaint Oak Ridge, spitting threats. She would never forget his savage eyes, arrogant smirk, and the hateful slurs he lobbed at her and other people of color. Back then, he'd written her off as just another small time dealer. But after months of clandestine work, Sarah had secured the proof federal agents needed to cripple a major branch of the Iron Skulls operation. Because of the mission's secrecy, her true identity remained hidden. To Thompson, Sarah Miller had been a ghost, an unknown adversary who'd cost him countless loyal foot soldiers. Yet, when she'd crossed his path today on the way to the Hendersons, something in his gaze had hinted at recognition. Sarah sighed, stashed her water, and resumed pedaling toward town. She knew this showdown was bigger than just her. It was a fight to protect Oak Ridge and its gentle folk from the Iron Skull's hate and violence. As soon as she returned home, Sarah headed straight for her basement safe room, a small concealed chamber she'd set up for emergencies. Behind a false wall lay her old military gear, secured weaponry, encrypted comms equipment, and classified files from past operations. She booted up the security computer, entered a familiar sequence of passcodes, and sent a brief alert to those she trusted above all, her former comrades now living quietly in Oak Ridge under civilian guises. First response came instantly from Frank Weber, ex-Special Forces captain turned appliance repairman. Then Bill Henderson, legendary Marine sniper, and now a peaceful farm owner, confirmed his readiness. Doc Wilson, the town's only doctor and a former SEAL Team 6 medic, replied next. Finally, Jim Parker, the elementary school principal who'd once led Force Recon Scouts, signed on. Within minutes, the covert network of veteran defenders hidden in everyday life across Oak Ridge was activated. Sarah knew she was no longer alone. Staring at the screen's map of the town with secret rally points marked, she thought, "Thompson, you made a grave mistake underestimating this little town." Sarah sat, feeling the surge of readiness in her veins. She'd worked hard to build this peaceful life, and now she'd defend it. No longer fighting in the shadows, she would stand in the light, backed by warriors as determined as she was to protect Oak Ridge at any cost. The moment the computer screen went dark, Sarah felt a fresh surge of energy coursing through her veins, banishing the heavy memories of the past. She rose to her feet, swiftly gathered the necessary documents, and slipped out the back door, heading straight for Doc Wilson's house, where the secret meeting would take place. Doc's modest Victorian home stood at the end of a quiet lane, its white picket fence draped in lavender blooms. Bathed in the pale glow of dusk, it looked as peaceful as any other house in Oak Ridge. But behind that weathered blue door lay a hidden room, where the town's veteran defenders would decide its fate in the face of the Iron Skull's threat. Sarah stepped inside to find Doc Wilson waiting at the threshold. He gave her a solemn nod, concern creasing his brow. "Everyone's down in the basement," he said quietly. The cellar door swung open to reveal a spacious, specially outfitted command center. A large table at the room's center bore a detailed map of Oak Ridge, surrounded by state-of-the-art encrypted radios. Around it sat the familiar, determined faces of comrades, in arms, veterans who'd survived life and death battles, yet kept their pasts hidden to live peacefully in this small town. Sarah took her seat, her eyes sweeping over each member, drawing strength from their presence. First was Frank Weber, a silver-haired powerhouse in his 60s, calm, resolute, and once a Special Forces captain leading elite units in Afghanistan. Known for his hand-to-hand combat skill and tactical brilliance under fire, Frank could turn any tool into a weapon and inspired fierce respect among his teammates. Next to him sat Bill Henderson, tall, broad, shouldered, with farmer's tan skin. A legendary Marine Corps sniper with an almost flawless record in the Middle East, Bill now tended a quiet farm outside town. Yet he still possessed that unnerving calm, razor-sharp observational skills and near-infallible marksmanship. Opposite Bill, Jim Parker sat with arms folded in quiet reflection. As Oak Ridge Elementary's principal, Jim appeared the picture of civility, But behind those scholarly glasses lay a former Force Recon, team commander in the Marines, gifted with surgical, precision planning, uncanny situational analysis, and masterful camouflage skills. At the head of the table was Doc Wilson himself, trusted by every Oak Ridge resident for his medical expertise. A former SEAL Team 6 medic, Doc had served on classified Gulf War and counter-terror operations. His battlefield first, aid skills were matched only by his psychological steadiness, making him the group's indispensable backbone in any crisis. When everyone had settled, Frank spoke first in a weighty tone. "We all know the Iron Skulls aren't ordinary thugs. They've grown from a small biker crew into a full-blown extremist criminal network. Since they arrived in Oak Ridge, they've made their intent clear, especially toward our town's minority community." Sarah added softly, her gaze grave, "Crusher Thompson isn't here just to make trouble. I know him well. He aims to control this town through fear and violence, targeting people like me first." The air in the room thickened with resolve. Frank nodded slowly and said firmly, "We can't wait for federal help, and we can't openly confront them yet. Our immediate goal is to delay and disrupt the Iron Skulls covertly, so they can't establish a strong foothold here." Jim placed a hand on the map, circling Miller's Creek. "They've set up their temporary base there. If we cut off their supplies and communications, we can force them into setbacks that slow down their plans." Bill agreed. "I can sabotage a few of their bikes to hinder their movements. Frank can quietly disable generators and comms gear, and Doc will monitor to ensure no innocents get hurt in these minor operations." Sarah looked around, pride and gratitude filling her voice. "But most importantly, we must protect our townspeople, especially the minority residents, from the Iron Skull's growing aggression. Thompson won't hesitate to use them as pawns to flaunt his power." Doc spoke up, calm but resolute. "Then we act tonight. We'll set up hidden observation posts and prepare protective measures. Sarah, you must be extra cautious. Now that they've marked you, they'll watch your every move." Sarah nodded with conviction. "I understand. But this time, I'm not alone. I have all of you at my back. Oak Ridge will never bow to the Iron Skull's brutality." The meeting adjourned, yet each person knew the real battle was only beginning, and this secret network would form Oak Ridge's first line of defense against the storm fast approaching. Early the next morning, tension hung over Oak Ridge. The town's gentle residents were already feeling the aggressive, arrogant presence of the Iron Skulls. They weren't hiding their intentions anymore. Instead, they were openly asserting their power through brazen acts of extortion, and Ruby's Cafe, the very symbol of the town's tranquility, was the first place they targeted. The moment Sarah arrived, she sensed something was off. Marge Wilson, the cafe's usually cheerful, sprightly owner, stood behind the counter with a worried expression and trembling hands as she wiped down a spotless table. Sarah approached and gently placed a hand on Marge's shoulder. "Marge, are you okay?" she asked. Marge jumped and looked up, her eyes wide with fear. Before she could answer, the cafe door slammed open, making them both start. Deacon Mills and Viper, two high-ranking members of the Iron Skulls, strode in like conquerors. Deacon, a burly, shaved headman with cold eyes, scanned the room and sneered. Close behind him was Viper, petite but with venomous reptilian eyes. Their tight leather outfits, each emblazoned with the gang's iron skull emblem, were a blatant declaration of dominance. "This place is pretty clean," Deacon drawled, oozing arrogance. "I bet you do some decent business in this backwater town, huh?" Marge steadied herself and replied politely but firmly, "This cafe only supports a handful of us. There's not much to spare." Viper sauntered forward, picked up a pristine glass, and deliberately let it slip from her fingers. The shattering crash echoed sharply through the cafe, and Marge flinched. "Oh, sorry about that," Viper said, her voice as cold as her smile. "My hand slipped." Deacon leaned in close, his threatening gaze locked on Marge. "Listen, old lady," he snarled. "If it weren't for us protecting this place, you wouldn't just be cleaning up broken glass, you'd be cleaning up bodies. This town isn't safe anymore." Marge's voice quavered, but remained firm. "Thank you, but we don't need protection. Oak Ridge has always been safe." Deacon laughed derisively, leaning back against the counter and glancing at Sarah with clear contempt. "Safe? How safe can it be when dirty black girls like you are freely delivering food? How do you think your customers feel about that?" His cruel words stabbed at Sarah's pride. She felt her blood boil and her fists clench, but she remembered Doc and Frank's warnings. She had to stay calm and not react impulsively. Noticing her anger, Deacon smirked. "What's the matter? You itching to fight back? I think you know your place." Viper added, "You'd better learn your lesson and behave. People like you should know how to keep your head down and do as you're told." Sarah ground her teeth, swallowing her fury, her voice steady despite the ice in her veins. "What do you want?" Deacon straightened, staring at her as if trying to pierce her soul. "Crusher wants to see you, little girl. He's got an offer just for you. Get moving. Don't make him wait." Sarah gave Marge a quick, reassuring nod. "I'll be fine, Marge," she whispered. Then, without another word, she followed Deacon and Viper out of the cafe, leaving the elderly woman standing there, eyes brimming with tears and worry. The motorcycle escort stopped in front of an old rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. Sarah dismounted, tension crackling through every muscle. The warehouse door creaked open, and there stood Crusher Thompson, his massive frame filling the doorway. "You made it, little black girl," he sneered, his voice dripping with scorn. "Looks like this town's going to hell if the likes of you can stroll around freely." Sarah said nothing, facing him squarely and masking every emotion. But inside, rage and contempt simmered like a fire. Thompson stepped closer, his eyes raking over her with disdain. "I always figured only worthless scum would let filthy black girls like you exist. But today, I'll give you credit, you're interesting." He paused, leaning in until his breath tickled her ear. "I know you're not ordinary. I know you have a military past. Hell, I even know you tangled with us once before under some unknown alias." Sarah remained silent, trying to conceal the storm raging inside. Thompson's gaze turned ice, cold, steel, sharp. "I'll give you a simple choice. Cooperate and be my eyes and ears in this damned town, or I'll turn your life, and the life of that old woman at the cafe and everyone like you, into a living hell." Sarah inhaled deeply and met his gaze without flinching. "And if I refuse?" He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Then we'll show you exactly where you belong. We won't go easy on you, especially not someone like you." Sarah fell silent, a fierce determination rising within her. She knew this was an extremely dangerous challenge, but she also knew she would never bow to threats or humiliation. No matter how terrifying the Iron Skulls were, neither she nor her allies would allow them to destroy Oak Ridge. The battle was only beginning, and Sarah Miller would make them regret ever underestimating the strength of a black woman like her. Sarah stepped out of the warehouse, each footfall slow but unwavering. In her mind, Crusher Thompson's cold, razor-sharp threats still rang as if he were standing right behind her. His contemptuous, suspicious gaze felt like needles piercing the carefully constructed facade she'd built. She knew this showdown had reached a perilous new phase, and now that Thompson had uncovered part of her secret military past, she would forever be in his crosshairs. One small mistake could endanger her life and the safety of all Oak Ridge. Within a day, rumors swept through town. Members of the Iron Skulls began eyeing her coldly wherever she appeared. Sarah knew she was under close watch, but she hadn't expected Thompson to unveil a more insidious test of her loyalty. That afternoon, just after completing her last delivery at Mrs. Linda's shop, Deacon awaited her outside, his eyes sharp as blades. Without a word, he beckoned her into the small truck parked nearby. "Let's go, black girl," Deacon sneered, a mocking half-smile playing on his lips. "Crusher has an important task for you." Sarah climbed in silently, her heart pounding like a war drum, every sense on high alert. When the truck stopped, they were back at the familiar old warehouse. Thompson stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression coldly calculating. "Welcome back," he rasped, eyeing Sarah like prey trapped in a snare. "I've got your first assignment to test your loyalty. I know you won't disappoint me." Sarah nodded, keeping her voice steady. "I'm ready." Thompson turned to a small, gleaming metal box on a nearby table. He picked it up and stepped close, never breaking eye contact. "This is special, extremely important," he said, each word deliberate. "Today's the summer festival, and thousands will flock here. You will take this box to the green booth on the south side. At precisely noon, a man in a gray suit will ask for Crusher's special order. Give it to him, then take whatever he gives you." The box felt icy in Sarah's hand, a chill seeping into her palm. Every instinct screamed that this was a deadly trap, a twisted game to prove her submission. "Don't be curious about what's inside," Thompson warned, his gaze ice cold. "Don't do anything foolish. If you betray me, I promise not only will you suffer, but everyone like you in this town will pay a heavy price." Sarah tightened her grip, silent. She knew Thompson was playing a cruel cat and mouse game he thought he controlled. As she turned to leave, his hoarse voice echoed behind her. "Don't disappoint me, black girl." The Oak Ridge Summer Festival was usually a riot of color and music, but for Sarah, every detail was fraught with tension. She scanned the crowd, clutching the metal box like a ticking challenge. She'd already tipped off Frank and Bill about this assignment as she left the warehouse. They all agreed it was a setup, but to keep their cover, she had to play along. Standing by the green booth, Sarah watched the clock strike 12. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a gray suit emerged through the crowd and approached. "Do you have Crusher's special order?" he asked quietly, his tone calm and professional. Sarah recognized him instantly. DEA agent, David Mitchell, with whom she'd worked on domestic counter. Terror missions. Her heart clenched as she realized the trap. Thompson was using her to intersect with DEA operations, framing her as an accomplice. She forced herself to remain calm, locking eyes with Mitchell as if to say, "This is a trap. Be careful." Mitchell's face remained impassive, playing his undercover role perfectly. "I do," Sarah replied softly, handing him the box. Mitchell took it and discreetly slipped her an envelope in return. As he melted back into the crowd, Sarah sensed danger closing in from behind. Deacon and Viper stood not far off, their cold eyes fixed on her. She understood. If Mitchell was truly DEA, her delivery could implicate her in the Iron Skull's crimes, just as Thompson planned. Clenching the envelope, her mind raced through perilous options. Thompson didn't only want to test her loyalty, he intended to eliminate her cleanly, leaving no trace. Her phone buzzed with a terse message from Frank. Trap activated. Withdraw immediately. Sarah spun around, struggling to stay composed amid the festival's chaos. Her heart thundered, knowing that one wrong move now could spring the deadly trap Thompson had so meticulously laid. The life and death struggle with the Iron Skulls had reached its decisive moment. Sarah knew she had to survive. To protect those she loved, and to show Crusher Thompson that she was no mere victim to be dominated by his dark schemes. Sarah wheeled around, about to slip through the thick festival crowd to follow Frank's urgent text, when Deacon's heavy, rough hand clamped down on her shoulder and yanked her backward with brutal force. "Where do you think you're off to, little girl?" Deacon hissed in her ear, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey and stale cigarettes. "I told you not to pull any stupid stunts." Sarah jerked her arm, trying to wrench free, but Deacon's iron grip held fast. People around them began to notice the commotion. Sarah felt dozens of curious eyes on her, yet no one dared intervene, intimidated by the sheer menace of the bald giant towering over her. "Get your hand off me!" Sarah snapped, her eyes blazing with fury and contempt. Deacon just sneered, his expression growing even more ruthless. "You think you're somebody talking back to me?" he snarled, hauling her toward a nearby van with one hand. "Someone like you needs to know her place, so you'd better behave." Sarah struggled fiercely, but Deacon shoved her against the side of the van, sending a jolt of pain through her shoulder. He pressed her face against the cold metal and spat out with contempt. "Black girls like you only know how to mess things up. I knew from the start you'd ruin my plan. It was a mistake letting Crusher trust you at all." Clenching her teeth, Sarah fought back her own explosive anger, knowing that any further resistance now would only make things worse. With a single motion, Deacon flung open the van door and shoved her inside. Sarah sat rigidly on the seat, her wrists bound tight with zip ties. The van roared to life and peeled away, leaving the vibrant summer festival and its oblivious crowd in the dust. When the side door of the van swung open again, a blinding shaft of daylight forced Sarah to squint. Deacon grabbed her arm and yanked her out, almost dragging her face first into the dirt. They stood before the familiar dilapidated warehouse, Crusher Thompson's usual hideout and planning ground for the gang. Inside, the air was thick with oil, smoke, and stale booze. Dim light revealed Crusher Thompson seated behind a battered folding chair, his face as cold and unyielding as stone, his massive arms folded defiantly across his chest. "You've disappointed me, Sarah," Thompson said, his voice calm but laced with lethal menace. "I gave you a chance to prove your loyalty, but you chose the dumbest path instead." Sarah planted her feet and met his gaze unflinchingly, despite the bruises blooming across her body from Deacon's rough handling. "I know you set me up from the beginning," she replied steadily, though her heart pounded and every nerve was on edge. "I'm not going to be your pawn." Thompson's lips curled into a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Pawn? You overestimate yourself. To me, you're nothing but a disposable piece on the board. But you will tell me, what intel did you pass to that DEA agent?" Sarah went silent, holding his stare in defiance. Thompson snapped. He lunged out of his chair and yanked her wrist, squeezing until she gritted her teeth. "Why so quiet? I'm asking you," he roared. His grip turned into a vice on her wrist. "I said nothing," she managed, her voice trembling with pain, but never wavering. "You misjudged me, Thompson. The DEA had its eyes on you long before you dragged me into this." Thompson ground his teeth and stared at her with murderous intensity. After a moment of chilling silence, he released her and leaned in close, his voice low and dangerous. "You think I'm dumb enough to fall for that juvenile trick? I know your military past, Sarah Miller. I know you were Delta Force, fought against us in California. Don't try to fool me." A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She'd suspected he knew some of her history, but hearing it spoken so directly made it real and terrifying. Thompson straightened and stepped back, folding his arms again. "You want to know why I picked Oak Ridge? This sleepy little town sits on our most important smuggling route. From here, we can ship weapons and drugs to dozens of major cities. That sweet summer festival, perfect cover for our first big run. And you, along with that pack of old vets, wrecked my plan." Each word he spoke dripped with malice and strategy. Sarah realized how dire the situation had become. Oak Ridge's unsuspecting residents were in the crosshairs of a ruthless operation. Thompson closed the distance once more, his cold gaze locking onto hers. "I'm done playing games. You will tell me everything you know, or I'll make you and everyone you care about pay, especially your people, black trash like you, understand?" Sarah said nothing, but she understood all too well. Her fight with the Iron Skulls had escalated into a fight for her very life. She had to find a way out, fast, before it was too late. Thompson turned to Deacon. "Keep her here. Interrogate her till she talks." Deacon stepped forward, eyes full of hatred. Sarah inhaled deeply, steeling herself for the hardest battle yet. No matter what pain lay ahead, she vowed she would never let Thompson or the Iron Skulls tear down the peace Oak Ridge's families had fought so hard to rebuild. The heavy footsteps of Crusher Thompson had barely faded down the dark corridor when the warehouse doors slammed shut and locked behind him, leaving Sarah alone with Deacon under the dim light. Deacon stepped forward, shrugging off his leather jacket to reveal arms covered in menacing tattoos. He slid a metal chair across the concrete floor and sat opposite her, his eyes glinting with cruelty. In the half-shadow, his features looked sharp with hatred and racial venom. "You heard what Crusher said, right?" Deacon's voice was low and threatening. "Now I'm giving you one last chance. Tell me everyone who's working with you, and what your next plan is." Sarah said nothing, meeting his gaze with steely resolve. Deacon sneered and shook his head. "Stubborn, aren't you?" he mocked, brandishing a small gleaming dagger under the flickering light. "I know you're trained to withstand pain, but trust me, your military skills won't save you in here." Sarah inhaled, bracing herself. She'd seen professional torturers like Deacon before. She knew his ruthless methods from classified missions, but she also knew that keeping her silence now would protect her teammates and the innocent people of Oak Ridge. Deacon rose, stalking toward her, and pressed the dagger's blade against her neck. He whispered in her ear, voice full of menace, "I'll make you regret disappointing Crusher. If you don't talk, this whole town will drown in blood, especially scum like you." Sarah felt the cold steel against her skin, but refused to show fear. Calmly, she spoke, "I have nothing to say to you." Deacon laughed, then slashed the blade lightly across her arm. Agony shot through Sarah's body, but she clenched her teeth and revealed no weakness. He unleashed a torrent of racial slurs and insults, trying to break her spirit. He mocked her skin color and background, but Sarah, drawing on every ounce of Delta Force grit, remained unmoved. Growing impatient, Deacon shoved her to the warehouse floor, yanking her hair to force her head up. "You really think those old vets can stop us?" he snarled. "We control Oak Ridge now. Soon, every useless old soldier and every black dog like you will die out here." Sarah closed her eyes, breathing evenly, focusing on controlling her heartbeat. She recalled the toughest Delta Force drills: never give the enemy an inch of advantage. As Deacon continued his brutal assault, Sarah discreetly activated a tiny emergency beacon hidden under her clothing, a secret signal reaching Oak Ridge's veteran network. Deacon never noticed. Outside, at Doc Wilson's safe house, Frank Weber's eyes locked onto the alert on the screen. His face hardened with resolve. "Sarah's been captured," Frank announced. "The Iron Skulls are torturing her. We have to move, now." Bill Henderson rose, worry and determination in his gaze. "She's risking everything to protect us. We can't leave her to suffer alone." Doc Wilson grabbed a medical kit, while Jim Parker readied tactical gear. Each man prepared to fight once more. "We're rescuing Sarah and driving the Iron Skulls out of Oak Ridge forever," Frank declared. "This is more than saving a teammate. This is defending our town's honor and peace." Back in the warehouse, Sarah endured every tormented moment, knowing her friends were on their way. With each agonizing second, her belief in justice and camaraderie fueled her will to survive. She would not break, because she was never truly alone. Inside the dark room, each minute stretched on like a century. Sarah felt every piercing wave of pain, yet she kept her spirit unbroken, knowing her teammates would never abandon her in this perilous moment. Suddenly, the weak yellow light flickered out, plunging everything into total darkness. Sarah knew at once this wasn't a random outage. It was the signal she'd been waiting for. Her heart thundered in her chest, warmth of hope and resolve surging through her veins. From outside the warehouse came chaos. Heavy boots pounding, panicked shouts from the Iron Skulls, as they realized their power and communications had been severed. In that disorienting uproar, Sarah understood her teammates had begun their rescue. Seizing the moment, she centered herself, controlling her breathing with the Delta Force techniques she'd mastered. With a decisive motion, she wrenched one wrist free of the zip tie, enduring the searing pain of a dislocated thumb to break the bond. Sweat streamed down her temples as she bit back a cry, swiftly freeing her other hand. In the dark, Deacon, still reeling from the blackout, cursed, groping for a light switch. "What the hell's happening out there, you useless bastards?" he roared. Silent and stealthy, Sarah crept up behind him. Before he could fully react, she struck the back of his neck with a surgically precise blow. Trained strength honed by years of special ops conditioning, sending him staggering and dropping his knife. Before he recovered, she delivered a powerful kick to his midsection, and he crumpled to the floor, unconscious in the gloom. Sarah snatched up the fallen knife and moved cautiously to the exit door, listening to the pandemonium beyond. She knew this was her chance to get out. She eased the door open and slipped into the warehouse's stifling blackness. The only light came from the wavering beams of Iron Skull's flashlights, cutting through the darkness as shouts, metal clangs, and breaking glass echoed off the walls. In a hidden corner, Frank Weber and Bill Henderson advanced in silent coordination, deploying tear, gas grenades, and audio, simulator devices that mimicked gunfire, plunging the gang into utter confusion. Jim Parker, drawing on years of combat experience, quietly severed the Skull's radio lines, isolating them completely. Outside, Doc Wilson monitored the situation via portable cameras, ready to provide medical aid. As Sarah darted down narrow, winding passages, avoiding flashlights and frantic voices, she nearly reached the exit when Crusher Thompson's cold, mocking voice boomed behind her. Not so fast, Sarah. You really think you can slip away from me? Thompson emerged from the shadows, leveling his pistol at her. Rage and hatred burned in his eyes. I underestimated you, but tonight it ends, here and now. Sarah froze for a heartbeat, then silently calculated her options. In the dark, she shifted her weight, keeping just enough distance, her eyes scanning for anything she could use as a weapon. Suddenly, something flew in from behind and struck Thompson at the base of the skull. He swayed, the gun slipping from his grasp and clattering to the floor. Out of the darkness stepped Frank Weber, his gaze steely. "Stay away from her, you bastard," Frank barked. Sarah lunged, grabbing the fallen pistol and training it on Thompson as he struggled to rise. At that moment, the unmistakable wail of sirens and the flash of red and blue strobes flooded the warehouse. The DEA had finally arrived and was sealing off the entire compound. Realizing the tide had turned, Thompson bolted back into the shadows, disappearing from view. Sarah and Frank exchanged determined looks. The fight was not yet over, but they needed to get out, fast. "Let's go," Frank ordered. Sarah nodded, and together they slipped past the incoming DEA teams. Bursting out into the night air, Sarah drew in a deep, ragged breath of freedom and relief. But she knew the war against the Iron Skulls was far from finished, and the dangers ahead would test her courage and resolve again and again. A bitter night wind cut through the abandoned warehouse yard, and the distant flash of police lights signaled that the end was near. Sarah, panting from the harrowing escape, had just stepped out the door when a cold, contemptuous voice stopped her in her tracks. "You think you've won, you pathetic black dog?" Crusher Thompson stepped from the shadows, eyes burning with hatred and prejudice. He gripped an iron bar like a cudgel, his face hard and lethal in the dim light. The faint glow from the distant sirens was just enough to reveal his chiseled features and the ice, gray glare he fixed on her, as if she were nothing more than weak prey. Sarah faced him squarely, spine straight, her gaze unwavering. Though her body still throbbed from the torture she'd endured, she refused to show an ounce of weakness. "You've lost, Thompson," she said clearly, her voice carrying authority that overpowered every ache in her flesh. "All your men have been rounded up by the DEA. There's nowhere left for you to run." Thompson laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Lost? I've never lost to a little black bitch like you. I'll crush you and make this goddamn town remember my name forever." Without warning, he lunged at her, swinging the iron bar in a brutal arc. Sarah sidestepped with reflexive agility, feeling the rush of air as the bar slammed past her. She countered with a savage kick to his ribs, but Thompson only rocked back briefly before regaining his balance. "You think your cheap military tricks can take me down?" he sneered, launching another ferocious blow. Each swing carried bone, shattering force. But Sarah stood firm. She focused every ounce of her training, eyes tracking his every twitch. Though Thompson had raw strength, Sarah saw his lack of finesse, a fatal flaw. Steadying her breath like in her Delta Force days, she waited for his next strike. As he raised the bar again, she dropped low and drove forward, channeling power from her hips and shoulders into a shoulder block that sent him down hard. The bar flew from his grasp. Seizing the moment, Sarah moved in to secure him, only for Thompson to explode upward, hands clamping around her throat in a vice, like grip. "You'll never be my equal," he snarled, hatred and contempt raging in his eyes. "You're nothing but an insolent mutt." Sarah felt his crushing pressure but refused to panic. Locking eyes with him, she targeted the gap at his side, striking him with a bone, jarring elbow to the ribs then driving her knee into his gut with every ounce of strength. Thompson doubled over, gasping in pain and fury. Sarah pounced, unleashing a blur of special ops precision. A punch to his jaw, a spinning kick to his chest, and finally a flawless arm lock that pinioned him face first to the ground. Crusher Thompson lay prone, his arms twisted behind his back. Despite frantic struggling, he couldn't break free of Sarah's expert hold. Sarah exhaled sharply, her voice cold and triumphant inches from his ear. "You looked down on me for the color of my skin, but your arrogance and hate are what lost you this fight." Thompson spat curses, utterly helpless under her lock. In the distance, the wail of DEA sirens grew louder. The federal agents had finally arrived. "Kill me, then," he rasped in desperation, still writhing. "You're too chicken to do it, aren't you, you cowardly little girl?" Sarah paused a moment, pity flickering in her eyes at his blind rage and hatred. She leaned closer, quiet but resolute. "I won't kill you, Thompson. Unlike you, I'm not a murderer. Justice will have its own way with you." No sooner had she spoken than headlights flooded the scene, and DEA agents in tactical gear poured in, sweeping the warehouse. Agent David Mitchell strode over and nodded in respect to Sarah. "Well done, Sarah. We'll take it from here." Sarah released Thompson, stepping back as agents cuffed and led him away. In his eyes lingered only despair and rage, and deep humiliation, as the man who once sneered at her was utterly defeated by the woman he so despised. Drawing a deep breath of cold night air, Sarah felt relief wash through her. The final battle was over, but the scars and memories remained. A reminder that the struggle against prejudice and injustice never truly ends. Yet tonight, she had won. A victory for justice and dignity, earned by every sacrifice she had made. The first light of dawn cast a pale glow over Oak Ridge, now shaken from its usual calm. The wail of federal police sirens filled the air as wave after wave of tactical vehicles rolled in, completely surrounding the Iron Skull's stronghold. The final showdown with Thompson had ended only hours ago, but Sarah's relief was cut short when she saw Agent David Mitchell approaching, his expression serious yet respectful. "Miss Miller, we'll take it from here," Mitchell said politely but firmly. "We're grateful for your bravery, but it's time for you to step aside so we can finish the job." Sarah nodded, masking her exhaustion with resolve. "Thank you, Agent Mitchell. I trust you'll handle it." Mitchell signaled his team, and dozens of DEA and FBI agents, fully armed, wearing body armor and helmets, poured into the compound like a tidal wave. They advanced methodically, each step precise and decisive, quickly subduing the remaining Iron Skull's members, who collapsed in defeat before the overwhelming force of law enforcement. From a distance, Sarah watched with a mix of relief and tension. She caught sight of the criminals' resentful glances as they were led away, but the most striking gaze was Thompson's. His cold eyes never left her, lips curling in a hateful whisper. "Not over, Sarah. You'll pay for this." Sarah met his stare without flinching. She knew Thompson wouldn't easily abandon his desire for revenge, but for now, he posed no further threat. Two burly agents approached and roughly pushed Thompson into a transport vehicle, snapping handcuffs on him. Agent Mitchell returned to Sarah's side, studying her intently. "Sarah, we need you to come with us for questioning. It's routine, but we need every detail. This is a major case spanning multiple states." Without hesitation, Sarah agreed. She knew she had to choose her words and actions carefully to protect her teammates and the covert network she had relied on. Inside the small interrogation room at the DEA's temporary Oak Ridge office, harsh white lights forced Sarah to blink as she adjusted her eyes. Mitchell sat across from her, a thick file of photos and documents spread out on the table. "Miss Miller, we've thoroughly vetted your background," Mitchell began, professional but not threatening. "You were an outstanding soldier in Delta Force, followed by a suspicious gap in your record. We know you're hiding something." Sarah met his gaze calmly, her voice steady. "Agent Mitchell, as I've said, after leaving the military, I simply returned home to care for my aging mother. My combat skills are in the past, but they're what kept me alive last night." Mitchell nodded slowly but remained unconvinced. A lone woman single-handedly took down Crusher Thompson and the Iron Skulls. "Do you really expect me to believe that?" Sarah held his gaze unwavering. "I don't expect you to take my word blindly, but I was defending myself. Thompson and his gang attacked me because of my skin color, and I reacted instinctively." Mitchell frowned and leaned forward. "But Thompson claims you didn't act alone. He insists you had backup, an entire team of military professionals aiding you in this operation." Sarah let out a soft chuckle, hiding the tension rising in her chest. "Thompson is desperate, Agent. He's dragging more people into this to share the blame. I'm just a black woman from a small town. Where would I get backup?" Mitchell studied her for a long beat, searching for any hint of deception in her eyes or demeanor, but she remained composed, exuding confidence. Finally, Mitchell sighed and closed the file. "For now, we can't corroborate Thompson's claims, but you should know this case is far bigger than you realize. We'll be watching closely." Sarah nodded gently. "I understand, Agent Mitchell. I'll cooperate fully, but I have nothing to hide." After the tense interrogation, Sarah emerged from the DEA office to find Frank Weber waiting under a tree, concern etched on his face. "You okay, Sarah?" Frank asked, eyes filled with worry. "I'm fine, Frank," Sarah replied with a small smile. "They found no evidence. We're safe for now." Frank exhaled in relief but remained vigilant, scanning the surroundings. "That's good, but we can't let our guard down. I know Thompson and any surviving skulls won't stop." Sarah gazed into the distance, the weight of what she'd been through still pressing on her. She knew that although this battle was won, the fight against prejudice, hatred, and violence would continue. Yet today, peace had returned to Oak Ridge, and that was enough to remind her that all her sacrifices, and those of her teammates, were worthwhile. As the last golden rays of sunset faded, draping Oak Ridge in a gentle glow, Sarah finally felt the town's peaceful breath returning. Streets, once rife with fear and tension, now seemed calm and quiet as ever. Yet, no matter how the scene around her changed, a part of Sarah's mind remained haunted by the memory of the battle she'd just endured. A few days after the Iron Skulls raid, Sarah was straightening up some items at Ruby's Cafe when the door opened. Agent David Mitchell, tall, professional, and purposefully calm, stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding hers. Sarah offered him a simple nod, betraying no surprise at his arrival. "Good morning, Agent Mitchell," she said softly, her tone as steady as though they were meeting on any ordinary day. "Good morning, Sarah," Mitchell replied with a warm smile, settling into the chair opposite her. He glanced around the small, tranquil cafe before speaking earnestly. "I don't want to keep you long. I just need to confirm your decision one last time. Opportunities like this don't come often." Sarah paused, her eyes tracing the rows of cups she'd just dried. For a moment, memories of covert missions and life and death struggles flooded her mind. Then she shook her head, her gaze firm. "I appreciate your offer, Agent," she said, "but my place is no longer on a battlefield. I've stood on that line between life and death too many times. Now, I want to protect this town in my own way, quietly, but just as effectively." Mitchell studied her for a long moment, genuine respect shining in his eyes. Finally, he nodded and smiled in understanding. "I respect your decision, Sarah. Oak Ridge is fortunate to have a silent guardian like you." When Mitchell left, Sarah felt an invisible weight lift from her shoulders. His footsteps receded, and the door closed gently behind him, like the final chapter of a perilous journey she'd just survived. In the days that followed, Oak Ridge gradually returned to its familiar rhythm. Laughter of children and the hum of friendly conversation once again filled the streets. Ruby's Cafe opened at 6 a.m. every morning, and Sarah quietly resumed her regular delivery rounds, though few could suspect she had become the town's secret protector. One sunny weekend afternoon, Sarah reunited with her closest comrades at Doc Wilson's home. Frank Weber, Bill Henderson, Jim Parker, and Doc Wilson gathered in Doc's cozy living room, each wearing expressions of relief laced with constant vigilance. Once again, this humble space served as their hidden headquarters. Frank led off, his tone calm but serious. "This war is over, but I don't think it's the last. Oak Ridge is safe again, but who knows what the future holds." Bill Henderson nodded in agreement. "We've been through too much to take this peace for granted. We must stay prepared." Doc Wilson spoke thoughtfully. "We need an early warning system, discreet but effective. A network only trusted few can access, so we can react immediately if danger strikes." Jim Parker smiled confidently, eyes bright. "A quiet network that never draws attention, yet strong enough to shield innocent residents from future threats. We can build that." Sarah looked around at her teammates, gratitude and absolute trust filling her heart. They were no longer just former soldiers. They were a family united by one cause: protecting this small town. "We fought side by side in war," Sarah said, her voice deep and powerful. "And now it's time to do it here in peace. We'll create a system strong enough to defend Oak Ridge without causing a stir. The townspeople will live safely, and we'll guard them from the shadows." Her teammates nodded in agreement, determination and pride shining in their eyes. Their lives would never be the same. Though they returned to everyday peace, the warrior spirit within each of them remained, ready to defend Oak Ridge at any cost. As night fell thick over Oak Ridge, the meeting ended. Sarah walked home along the familiar road she'd traveled hundreds of times, footsteps light under the starlit sky. Looking up at the sparkling heavens, she felt a rare sense of calm. Everyday life had come back, but now she understood more than ever what every day meant: safety, peace, and the preciousness worth fighting and sacrificing for. In the silent darkness, Sarah made a vow to herself that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always rise to protect Oak Ridge, her beloved home, for which she was always ready to sacrifice. After life in Oak Ridge returned to normal, each day drifted by as gently as a summer breeze, but there was something different lingering in the townspeople's hearts. They sensed that this peace wasn't just a stroke of luck, but the result of the sacrifices and quiet courage of the people who had protected their town. Sarah resumed her delivery route for Ruby's Cafe as if nothing had happened, but now every step she took down the familiar streets was met with looks of admiration and respect. They might not know the dangers she'd faced, but they instinctively understood that she'd played a part in preserving Oak Ridge's greatest treasure, its safety. One warm, golden afternoon, as Sarah finished her last delivery and made her way back into the cafe, she found Marge leaning against the counter, her expression patient and expectant. "Sarah," Marge called in a tone both friendly and serious, motioning her over. "Could we talk for a minute?" Sarah gave a gentle smile and sat across from her. Marge's eyes were full of affection, and something deeper left unspoken. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," Marge began, her voice full of emotion. "I've always known you were a strong woman, but I never truly realized who you were until recently." Sarah paused, her gaze thoughtful as she met Marge's sincere eyes. She understood what Marge was getting at. "To be honest, I never wanted anyone to know about my past," Sarah said softly. "I just wanted a normal life. But when I saw our town in danger, I knew I couldn't stand by." Marge nodded slowly, her eyes shining with emotion. "Sarah, I want to apologize to you and on behalf of everyone here who may have judged you before because of your skin color. I know those subtle prejudices still linger." Placing a warm hand on Marge's shoulder, Sarah spoke firmly yet kindly. "I know all too well, Marge. I've lived my whole life under those glances. But if we don't stand up against what's wrong, it will never end. I chose to act rather than complain. And I know Oak Ridge isn't just full of people with bias. It has people like you, willing to listen, learn, and change alongside me." Marge smiled and brushed away a tear. "You're right, Sarah. Oak Ridge is lucky to have you, and from now on, I'll always stand by you in whatever fight comes next." The two women sat together in a peaceful, meaningful silence. In that quiet moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them, that though their small town had known pain from prejudice and violence, it was courage and unity that had seen them through. In the days that followed, the story of Sarah and the veteran defenders became a vibrant part of Oak Ridge's living history. People didn't talk about it openly, but everyone felt more keenly than ever the silent presence of those who kept their town safe. Late at night, Sarah would often pause on her porch to watch the little street bathed in soft yellow lamplight. She knew that, even though she had chosen not to return to the dangerous life of her past, her mission to protect this community would remain her quiet, sweet burden for the rest of her days. Oak Ridge was no longer just a peaceful little town. It stood as a living symbol of bravery, showing how prejudice and racism can be overcome by those strong enough to stand up and defend their neighbors and the values they hold dear. One day, as she walked through the town square, Sarah saw children of every background playing together under the afternoon sun, free of the biases that once divided them. Looking into their innocent eyes, she felt deeply that every risk she'd taken had been worth it. Never underestimate someone because of their appearance, skin color, or background, Sarah whispered to herself, a warm, hopeful smile crossing her face. True strength lives in those brave enough to defend their community. Those words were her vow, a powerful reminder that the fight against injustice, prejudice, and violence would continue. But as long as there were people like Sarah and her companions, ready to stand up for what's right, hope for a fairer, kinder world would never die. As she made her way back to Ruby's cafe, the evening sun stretched across the town, carrying with it the fierce belief that Oak Ridge would always be the home where she, and those who stood with her, would rise again to protect everyone, no matter who they are, where they came from, or the color of their skin. Because, in the end, true worth isn't skin deep. It's defined by courageous deeds and a compassionate heart. And that is the strongest legacy Sarah and her fellow heroes will leave for Oak Ridge and for generations to come. Have you ever faced or witnessed prejudice because of someone's appearance or race? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends to spread this powerful message, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss our next inspiring story. Thanks for watching.